Hi, Mark here again from Ivory Egg. In this video we're going to have a look at ETS, and this time we're going to look at how to create a project and look around that kind of project view within ETS. If you've not checked out the first video, which is more of an introduction to the ETS software, including where to download it from, how to set up the software in its first instance, then check that one out or share a link. But this one we're going to really dig into how to create a project and just kind of the key things you need to know in that environment. So let's get into it. Within ETS, we're in the overview tab. We just create a new project here with the plus. We'll call it my house. The settings here relate to the topology layers, whether you've got an IP backbone, which is a KNX IP link, or whether you've got twisted pair and the different group address types. Now the defaults are normally okay. For more of an overview of how the different KNX topologies work, check out the intro to KNX video again. I'll share a link. So we've done that. We'll use the default ones, and then we'll create a project. Now it's going to launch the project view. Now within ETS, there's the two views. This is the project environment where we'll do all our programming for a project. If we want to get back to that main overview and the different settings for the software, we click the green ETS at the top, and that will jump between the two different windows. And then a project, there's lots and lots of different panels which enable you to program different aspects, and there's lots of different ways of doing things. So I'm going to show the simplest ones, but there's so many different ways you can approach it. You can do most things in about 3 or 4 different ways. So a couple of different views that are really important, these panels. The first is the buildings view, which is opened automatically. If we click on workplace, we can see the other panels. So we've got building, group address, topology, project root, devices, and reports. Now the top 3 are the main ones. Building gives us an overview of the physical layout of the building, which we'll create in a minute. Group address is how we link different items together, and topology is an overview and all the devices in the system topology, which isn't as linked to the building. You might have different topology, different layers of cabling through the building. That's separate to the physical layout of the house. So we'll have a look at them, and that will make a bit more sense. But because we're going to be using these 3 a lot, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to bring them out of the menu and put them on our taskbar. So we're going to customize the toolbar, and we're going to add a separator, which will should sneak in there, and then we can add in the building view, and we can add in the group address view and topology. And then in time, we can actually just change them to icons only, which simplifies the menu structure, but I'll leave them as text now so it's clear. And we didn't actually need that separator. So now we've done that, we've got those 3 that we can get to nice and quickly. So back to the building view. Now we need to create a building. So we've got our house already. In our house, we need to add the different parts, the different floors and the different rooms. And if we click this drop down, we can see the different items we can add. Now we're just going to quickly do we're not going to do floors and breaking it all down, just for to speed things up a little bit, but obviously you can create your full layout. I'm going to add a room, and I'm going to add a kitchen. Now there's 2 types of ways to add a room. The first is the way I just did, where you go to the list and you choose the room name and the icon. The other one is to click on rooms, which will create this add rooms box, and you can add multiple rooms at the same time. It might be a lounge. You might, if you click the plus, you can add multiple rooms. Let's just say we've got a bedroom. Maybe it's a little studio apartment, or a little 1-bedroom apartment. The key here is to make sure you do set the usage for the room. This links to a tagging within the system, which means when an external IoT system connects to KNX, it knows how to find the different rooms. This is a relatively new addition to the ETS programming, so do make sure you set the room usage. It might not be exact, but get it as close as you can. So we've got the bedroom, and for our lounge, we'll call it the living room because they're close enough. So that room usage is actually really important, especially for the future proofing of the system. When we created the kitchen, it did it automatically, because when you use that list of room names, it automatically has that tag in it. So we've created a couple of rooms. The next thing to do would be add products into the system, much as you would add them in the installation, where you physically wire a device, a keypad into the system. We need to add them into the software as well. So to do that, we're going to open the catalog. In the first video, I showed how to create the online catalog and build it up so you've got all the manufacturer's products. That's why this is populated with lots of different products, which will automatically download and add to the system. So I'm going to add a keypad. I'm just going to use one. This is a 2-button keypad. When we click on the keypad here, the device, we get a bit of information over here on the catalog tab. Sometimes we get an image, not all the time. This is it's a one rocker keypad, so you've got a button on one side and a button on the other. It also tells us its bus current, which is quite useful for calculating the size of the power supply needed in the system. Now, sometimes there'll be multiple application versions. There isn't in this case, it's just version 1.1. Generally, just use the most up-to-date one. If you get an error when you're trying to download, which says memory block fail or application mismatch, you'll need to just use the most up-to-date application version. So we've got this, and we're going to add it into our kitchen. Pick it up and drop it into the kitchen. That will download it and add it to the system. Sometimes it takes longer. Sometimes the online file is a slightly older version than the ETS software, and it needs to do a little update at a download, which is called a product schema update. That sometimes takes 20-30 seconds, sometimes a little bit longer, but generally speaking, it will happen very fast as it has there. So we've got a keypad in our kitchen, and now we're going to add a relay so that we can switch a light on and off. Again, I'm just going to use one from memory. So here's this is an 8-way switching actuator, or it can be configured as four-way blind using 2 of the channels together. And again, it's got our bus current and it's giving us our DIN rail mounting. So we've got the size of the product, 4 modules, so we know how to count the size of our panels. So we're going to add this one, but we're going to add this one a slightly different way. Down here, we've got the ability to add multiple items into the building part, which is what we've selected at the moment, and it's chosen the kitchen because we've got that selected up here. If we change it, it's going to change it to the lounge. We'll keep it in the kitchen, keep everything together, but we can see there are different ways of adding something into the system. Nice and quick. And you can also just double click it and it will go into the what's defaulted down here. So I'll double click it and it will add 2 into the kitchen. Now we don't need 2 devices in the kitchen, so I'm just going to delete one of them. Right click, and then you'll be able to select delete, and then it will give the warning. Now you can turn off this warning. I find it quite useful, just provides that reassurance that you aren't doing something you're not supposed to be doing. So now we can see in our kitchen we have a keypad, a push button, and we have a relay. And again, with this software showing lots of different things in different ways, we can see the list here under the kitchen. If we select the kitchen, we can see the same devices here. If we select the device, then we'll get different information in our main tab in the building view. Before we go on to the next step, I'm just going to close the catalog. We don't need it anymore. We've added the products we needed into the system. And it is a little tip. Make sure that you are in control of your workspace. Don't just have panels open that you're not using. There's a lot of information going on. So the best thing you can do is try and keep it as clean as possible and only show what you need to. So if we select a device now, we can see we're going to look at how we configure the device, but before that I just wanted to quickly go through the properties tab over here, which is a panel that comes in and out from the right hand side, can be extended. Here we've got the information about the device. We've got its name, which is using the default one, but we might change that to kitchen keypad. We can give it we can change its address. Now the address is where it sits in the bus, in the actual system, and we'll see that in the topology view when we come to it in a minute. We can add information like a description about what the keypad might be doing. We can also set a programming status, which is quite useful to track where you are up to in the project or on the individual device. Under comments, we can add additional information. Maybe there's maybe when you were installing it, the back box was a little bit loose, and you need to be careful if you take the keypad off the wall, for example. Or it might be some devices are quite small and can be hidden behind other devices. It might be a little input module that you've put behind a keypad that's got a relay actuator in it for the lights. So here you might say, hidden behind keypad 5. That just enables you to provide kind of a record of the installation. And then finally, we've got the information tab. Now, the information one will tell you the catalog information, which we saw when we were on the catalog, the bus current. This one is key here, the application tab. Now, it's quite hidden down. We've had to go through a couple of different layers, but this is where it tells you which application version you're using in the software. And if you've got multiple versions in the project, you've added them to the project from the catalog, you can also update and change the application version from down here. So quite useful here to find out which the program version is. So we don't need the properties tab just at the moment though, so we've given it a name, and as we've seen, when we've changed the name, it's automatically updated over here. We've also got our relay, and we'll just we'll use the default name, but let's just tidy it up a little bit and get rid of the description part of the name. So there we go. We've now got the two. We'll call it the relay. Actually, we'll call it. We'll change it to a proper label. We'll call it switching actuator 1, which means it's the first switching actuator in the system, and we'll see that later when we create labels. So now we've got two products. The next step is to configure how we want those products to work. If we start on the kitchen keypad, see down here we've got the group objects and parameters. Group objects are how devices communicate with each other. We need to link them into group addresses. But before we do that, we need to parameterize the device to make sure it works in the way we want. Once you click parameters, you'll get the actual kind of settings for the individual device. Now, each device will need the settings configured to make sure it works in the right way. And normally you'll have a general tab or a couple of general tabs at the top, which will be settings for the whole device, and then you'll have the more specific functions. So in this case, there's some does the device start up straight away, or does it wait a while before joining the bus? Maybe it's going to send messages onto the bus, so you want to stagger when devices start up. We can add kind of enable additional function like its ability to measure the room temperature. And as we've enabled this, it's going to open another page here of settings. Some settings around how brightness on the device works on the keypad. We then have the operation concept, which tells us whether it's a rocker or it's a button, whether you've got two individual buttons left and right, or if they're tied together so that the two buttons are linked. Now, of course, these are going to be different for each different product and each different manufacturer. So this is just kind of an example of what the type of settings you might find are. This is where it's working, reading manuals, understanding the products, coming onto training, coming onto the basic course or more or specific training from training providers or distributors, training centers, but also manufacturer training as well, is where you're going to get the information of how to configure the individual devices. So we're going to look at the rocker, and we're going to keep it super simple. So this is a switching rocker, so when you press the left button, it's going to turn on. When you release the button, it's not going to do anything, and if you press the right button, it will turn the circuit off. So we've got a left on-off rocker on each side of the keypad. Now we can do things like change the status LED and different functions, add scenes, things like that. But right now we'll keep it simple, so we'll just have a simple switching rocker. So now we've configured that the parameters. If we look back at the group objects, we've got two things. One is the rocker switching on and off, and then there's that room temperature measurement that I enabled, which is giving us a temperature value. So that's all we need from the keypad. If we have a quick look at the switching actuator, again, it's defaulted to the group objects, but first we've got to go into the parameters and make sure it's configured the right way. We have the general tab where we've got the settings for the device again, and in this case we're actually able to use different physical devices. So the same single software application works for both the 8-channel device and the 16-channel device in this example. So sometimes you might be changing, quite a base level of functionality in that general tab. And then we've got what the channels do. Again, we can change it between switching actuators and blind actuators, but we can only do that on the first 4 channels because it's an 8-channel switching actuator, which makes it a 4-channel blind actuator. If we change all of these, then it will associate those other channels with the first 4. But we'll keep it as a switching actuator. And then we now go into the channel specific functions. So channel 1 here, we have the settings for the channel. Now these default settings will be okay. It's switching on and off. It might be we want things like delays or pauses, but we're going to switch it on and off. We can use a threshold value. So instead of turning on and off based on an on-off signal. We can say if you receive a value over a certain level, turn on. Now here, when we've turned this on, it's given us another page of parameters. Just keep in mind that when you enable or disable a parameter, that might be happening down here in the menu, not happening on the page you can see. And then we might want to say we have feedback, and then different settings there again, opening this other page where we can define different parameters for how the feedback will work. Okay, so now we've set that device up, we'll have a look at the objects. Oh, there's a lot there, and they're there because all the channels are enabled by default. We don't need all of this. This is where we just need to focus on the information we need, which is channel 1 switching object. So although we've got a very long list of parameters, sometimes there's a lot of information in front of you. You've just got to look for the thing you need and just focus in on that. So now we've got two devices configured, and we need to link them together in a group address. So to do that, we need this other panel. So if we click group addresses, it's going to open it. You can move these around and adjust them as you need to. You can also open them in separate windows. So if we, within group addresses, now we said it was a 3-level group address. And those 3 levels are just filing levels. They're there to make it easier for us to manage all the different group addresses across the project. So in the main group, I'm going to call it lighting. And then I've got main group here, and then I need to add a middle group, which is the 2nd level, which in this case I'm going to call the kitchen. And then finally, I'm going to add the actual group address, which is here, add group address, which will be the kitchen. Now it is important to put this room name here again, because when you see the messages in the group monitor, which enables you to see the traffic on the bus, you don't have the benefit of all these different filing labels. So all you will see is the group address name. So it's really important the actual group address name has useful information in it. So we're going to say it's the kitchen. We're going to say it's the circuit we're controlling, which we'll call downlight. And we know that they're on switching actuator 1, channel 1. So we've got a little bit of wiring information there as well. We know the circuit we're going to control. And let's put on here also keypad 1, and it's being controlled from keypad 1. Now I've given this is a really simple way of doing it. There's lots of different ways of doing the group addressing structure, and if you look on our website, ivoryegg.co.uk, under the learn section, there's actually a guide to some different group address kind of ways of doing the group addresses, because there's a couple of different kind of schemes for it. So we've put the room, we've told it what it's controlling. And we've got the circuit that we're controlling, switching actuator 1, channel 1, and we've got keypad 1. The final bit is what we're actually doing, which is a switching command. So we're turning something on and off. And again, you could often do this in a much shorter form, but just for it to be nice and clear, we'll leave it like that. So now we have our group address, and the group address is 001. That's the number along with its name, and then we've got some other settings which aren't relevant in this example. We can also, because we've selected the middle group here, we would see all our group addresses. If we want to actually see what's in the group address, we can click here, and that will go in, and then the view is of the group address. Now we need to link together the different devices. So we'll take our kitchen keypad, we'll take our rocker 1, and we'll drag it down, and we'll put it into the group address, and that will add that object into it. And now we can see if we click on the group address, we have the object in it. We also need the relay, so switching object channel 1 will also add that into the group address. Now those two devices are linked, or they're linked in the software at least. There's lots of different ways to do that. You can drag from group addresses up to an object. You can right click, add to group address as well, link with. Lots of different ways to do things. If you have expanded views here, you can drag them from here. Anywhere where it's the object you want to link to another object, you can generally pick it up and drag it to the one you want. So our group address now has the 2 channels we want to control. The final view to look at is the topology view. So I'm going to open topology. I'm going to close the buildings view just to keep it nice and clear. The topology view is the actual physical layout of the KNX bus. Now this has been happening automatically in the background. The first thing we did was when we created the project, we said that the backbone, the highest level in the system, was IP. We can see that here. We then have an area which was created automatically. We have a line, and on that line we have our two devices, and it's given them the default address of, let's just address them in order. So the first device is 1.1.1 and the second address is 1.1.2. As a project gets larger, this will start to fill up, and as you have, if you have multiple lines with different line couplers separating areas, maybe you've got KNX RF lines and you've got IP devices, this topology view becomes really important. It's where you can change different settings about what different lines are, how they work, and just manage where devices physically are in the system. But for us in the small example, it is a lot less relevant. And a lot of the time, the building view actually provides a better understanding of the project because you can see where devices are in the system. So from any of the views, the last step is to download to the devices that we've physically installed. So to do that, we would select the devices and we can select download. Now, if you just click download, it's going to do a default to a partial download unless it needs to do some of the other download types. The first type is, the main type is download all. That downloads all the information to the device, including the first step of giving its physical address. Now that's a physical step where you push the ID on the device, it then gets given its address. Really important that only one device gets an address at a time, otherwise you're going to have conflicts in the system. So download all will download the physical address, or the individual address, sorry. It used to be called the physical address, now it's called the individual address. Sometimes people will use both terms, they are interchangeable. So it will download the individual address, and then it will download the information for how the device needs to operate. The other one is download partial, which will only download any changes that you've made. So once you've done your initial addressing, download partial is the one that you use most of the time because it's the fastest way. It will only download what it needs to. You can just to download the individual address, and it's really useful if you've just come to a project and you want to make sure everything's connected to the bus and working, but you don't want to spend a lot of time downloading the application. Maybe you've not done the programming yet. Just doing the individual addresses first enables you to make sure everything is working correctly, and then you can start to download the applications and the software. You are able to overwrite an individual address. Once something's been addressed in the system, you know where it is. You can then find it and move it to a different address. And then finally, you've got download application. The two real steps are download the individual address, so you do that as an individual step, and then download the application. Download partial is downloading a partial application. So when it comes to actually just programming a project, once everything's addressed, you'll either be using download partial or you'll be doing download application. Because this would be the first download, I would need to select, I selected download partial. It knows that the devices don't have an address, so it's actually going to override and say, I need to program this device. Now, it's opened the pending operations tab, which is my little download window. And from here, I can see it's asking me to press the programming button on the device. Now, I don't actually have these devices in the system, connected to a system, but there's just an example of how the download window would work. You can cancel actions, you can cancel all, and you can also see the history of what your programming has what programming is completed. So I've cancelled them, and now it's automatically jumped over to the history, so I can see that I had issues there. So you can select multiple devices to download, and once you've done the individual addressing, that's how you would normally do it. You know all the devices that need downloading, select what you need to download, and then check the history to make sure they've worked. So those are the main steps in terms of getting something working, in terms of what you might need to the steps you'll need to take to link different products together. A couple of other little tips though. Obviously creating all the parameters and getting this all set up is going to take a lot of work for each product. But you don't have to start new every time. Whatever parameter changes I've made here, if I copy and paste this product, if I copy it and then paste it back into the line, I'll get a new keypad, and it's going to have the same parameters as the last one. It won't have the same links. It's not linked to those group objects. It's got them there, the links. I don't have the view enabled. So if we just right click on top of one of these, we can enable group addresses, and there we can see the group address that I've linked it. We can enable a lot of information as well, like the description, and that will bring the description up from the group address view. So you've got control over what is actually being shown in each of these pages. So if we look at the other one, the second copy one, it's not got that group address linked. So what we would normally suggest is you add the products that you would need, maybe using the same keypad throughout. Configure it for what's going to generally be how the product's going to be used. Maybe you're going to have a 6-button keypad, and there's going to be 4 scenes and then an on-off. So you'd configure that, then duplicate it in the project, and then you're able to add the group addressing. You've saved yourself a lot of time with the programming. Another thing which is quite neat is the ability to do functions. Now functions, if we go to click on a room, we want to add a device, we can add functions here. This adds things like light circuits and heating. It automatically creates the group addresses, and it enables you to link devices together in a slightly faster way. We'll cover that in a separate video because there's some setup needed to make it work correctly. But using functions, you can massively speed up how long your project takes to commission. The final thing to look at would be the Diagnostics tab. In Diagnostics is where we can see what is happening on the system. So I've clicked it, and it's opened a new panel. This is a great example of things starting to get pretty crowded pretty quickly. I had the topology view open. We kind of didn't need it anymore. Then I opened the buildings view. We did a bit there, and now I've got the Diagnostics. I could close that one, and everything becomes a lot cleaner and simpler. Or potentially I could close them both. Or I might want to make my Diagnostics tab full so I can see all the information that's happening on the bus. And if I click on the Buildings tab, I can get back. So in here I might have, group addresses and building. I'm doing my programming, and then I've got my separate tab for Diagnostics. Now, because I've launched Diagnostics from within the project, this is the best way to do it. You've got 2 different things here. You've got Group Monitor and Bus Monitor. Group Monitor will show you all the traffic on the bus that is related to devices communicating. It won't show you things like repeated messages or error messages. So Group Monitor is what you'd use for testing to make sure your programming works. Bus Monitor gives you a full view of what's actually happening on the bus, which is useful for diagnosing system faults. If things aren't working the way you're expecting, you want to make sure you're not overloading the bus, those kind of things, then the Bus Monitor is the better view. Most of the time you'll be using Group Monitor. From Diagnostics, you can also do things like check devices, see if they're in the system, and you can control things like addresses, check the number of devices in the system, check if any devices are in programming mode. And the final tip, because you have to be really careful that there aren't multiple devices in programming mode, because you could create those multiple addresses in the system. All KNX devices will restart without the programming mode on. So if you're not sure, if you're getting some weird behavior here and it's saying devices are in programming mode but you're not sure, then reset the bus, turn off the bus power supply, turn it back on again, and then you'll be sure that all the devices in the system aren't in programming mode, and then you can go around and program them individually. Right, that's it for this introduction to ETS video. Hopefully that's given an idea of how you can use ETS to create a project and some of the steps you'll need to take when it comes to programming. It's a pretty powerful program with lots going on. There's always lots of different ways to do things. So it can be a little bit intimidating at first, but it really does start to make sense when you start to connect to products and download and start to see things happening. Loads of other videos on the channel, so make sure to subscribe. There's various product videos, technical videos going into more detail, and some other introduction videos. And if you're interested in finding out more about KNX or looking at coming on training or want to find out about products, then check out the Ivory Egg websites. We are certainly here to help and guide you through your KNX journey. Thank you very much for watching.